Okay. Okay. Welcome, everyone. Hope you can see my screen. Welcome to session 38 of D365 UG India group. Today we'll be talking about how not to build Power Automate flows. So, and we have with us our speaker from UK, Matt Colin Jones. We'll start with a brief group introduction, the introduction for our volunteers. Then we'll talk about, we'll hand over to Matt for this great topic. And in the end, we'll talk about what are the other sessions, other topics for the next sessions we'll be covering. And before we start, there are some disclaimers. First of all, the views expressed from our speakers, from Matt today especially, are the personal views of the speaker, and they do not basically represent the views from any employer or their employees or from Microsoft. The data will be sharing, or any speaker will be sharing, will be from Contoso demo data and lab environments, and none of the client environments are being used there. Any recommendation which comes out of the session should not be applied to production environment directly and should be tested in a sandbox environment first. The session will be recorded on Teams, and if you do not consent to be part of the recorded session, then it is a good time to disconnect. So before I hand over to Matt, just a brief introduction about our group. So our group, which we started almost 2 years back, Rajit. Rajit is our founding member, supported by Umesh, myself, and Deepak. We are available on LinkedIn, on Twitter, which is what's the name of the Twitter now? X.
X, yeah.
I'm still not used to
Controls, yeah, X.
This bird represents still the Twitter for me. And we are also on YouTube, where you will find us more often. We have more than 2,700 members globally now. As Matt said before, we are a global group now. People connect from most part of the world with us every month. And definitely the networking and connecting with people, learning and growing together is our main motto in this group. So we have 37 sessions so far in last 2.5 years, and all the sessions you can find on our YouTube channel. So today's session, very interesting topic. I'm personally very much interested in this topic. I'm from FNO world. Don't know about all these new technologies coming from Microsoft around Power Platform. So whenever somebody talks about these topics, I'm very much interested. So Matt, over to you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I'll just share my presentation if it wants to work. Cool. So hopefully that's coming through okay. Yeah.
Yep.
Cool. So yes, thank you for the invite today. I'm very happy to be here. I love talking about Power Automate. I am not from the FNO world. I'm from the CE side of things. Historically, a CRM 4.0 on-premise. If anyone knows about that far, it's a good sort of 15 years ago now. God, I'm old. And one of my passions is Power Automate and Cloudflow specifically. And today I want to talk about how not to build Cloudflow. So this comes from years of working with Power Automate and years of looking at projects and looking at Cloudflows and going, why, oh, why did you do that? That's not the best thing. You need some more, you need to look at some best practices and things like that. So that's what this session is about. If my slides don't transition or disappear, please just interrupt me. I do talk quite a lot, so it's often hard to find a gap when I'll stop talking. So today's agenda, we're going to talk about why building flows poorly is bad. We're going to do my top 10 tips for better flows with some interactive or some demos that I'm going to go through. We'll see how well they go. We're also going to talk about resources that can help you build really great flows in future. And I do have some time for a Q&A at the end, hopefully. So if you don't know who I am, my name is Matt Collins-Jones. A lot of people call me MCJ because it's a lot easier than saying Matt Collins-Jones. I am a senior Power Platform solution architect at Capgemini in the UK. I work alongside Deepak, who was the one that kind of roped me into this presentation. I said, hey, I like speaking at things, and he said, okay. So that's why I'm here today. I've been working with the Power Platform and Biz Apps for over 10 years. I was recently awarded, as in last week, or last week, this week, I don't know which week it is. Maybe last week, maybe this week, who knows? With the Microsoft FTRSA, so the Microsoft Fast Track Recognized Solution Architect in Power Automate. So it's very kind of good timing for having this presentation. I'm also a Microsoft MVP and a Microsoft Certified Trainer. As you'll find from this presentation, I do love training. If I wasn't in software and IT, I'd be a teacher because I do like training and teaching people things. So let's talk about why building flows poorly is bad. First thing I often find when I'm looking at any solution is that I can't find the flow. I don't know where it is because there's all these solutions. All the flows are named very poorly. There's no accurate way to find the flow that's named in the right way. So firstly, naming of flows and not knowing where they are causes a lot of time and effort to try and find them, try and troubleshoot them and everything else. So not knowing where my flows are is a very, very annoying thing for me. Secondly is confusion. What does this flow do? How does it work? If I can't look at the name of a flow, if I can't look at description or see from a snapshot each thing that it's doing, it's going to take me even more time. So the time taken to understand how this thing is built is very annoying and very confusing. Cost. I keep talking about time. Time is money. The amount of time that I spend building something or trying to troubleshoot something or trying to find something is all going to add up, and at the end of the day, it's going to be us that's going to affect the most in terms of money. Performance. I always get a laugh out of this GIF. It's going to severely impact your performance if you're not building things in the correct way. If you're not building things in a performant way, your flow is going to run for a long time. If you're building things that have too many API calls, they're going to get throttled by Microsoft, and therefore they're not going to work, and your performance is going to be impacted. And again, it's all down to how you build things and how you think about things. Supportability. I come from a support background. I'm used to trying to pick up things that other people have built, and when they're not built correctly, it means that you can't support them and you have to refactor them. And that's not really a support responsibility, but it just means that you can't support this thing. So if you build it right the first time, then you don't need to worry about the supportability later. Scalability. It's all well and good creating something on a small scale, thinking, oh, this is only ever going to use this one use case, and therefore it doesn't really matter that much that maybe I have 50 actions to do one thing, really. But it actually does, because 9 times out of 10, it's never going to just work at that small scale. And you have to think about if this flow is going to run and it takes, say, 30 seconds each time it runs, that's not too bad. But if it's going to take 30 seconds and you're running it 1,000 times an hour, that's actually pretty bad, because your flow's not compliant. So when you have to scale up for those larger organizations or when it actually hits production, it's just going to fall over. So it's not going to work. So these are my top 10 tips with a bonus 10A tip as well, if you're so inclined, and some of the things that we're going to cover today. This presentation is all about kind of best practices. So identifying where things aren't going right or where things are going to take that bit more time, and then comparing it to what I think a best practice looks like in terms of the flow, the scalability, and best practices. So we're going to go through each one of these, and I'm going to do this in the form of a demo. Yay! Because everyone loves demos. No one likes slides. I will quickly whiz through these slides, and I'll hand them over to the organisers as well if you guys want the slides as well. So I'm going to stop sharing this for now, and then I'm going to launch my other sharing.
By the way, everyone is liking the GIF files method.
That's good to know. Good to know. I do like a good GIF. Can you see the screen okay? It should be in the Solution Explorer at the moment.
Yep.
Cool.
Yes.
Yep.
So in terms of, those of you from the F&O world that may be not familiar with Dataverse solutions, this is a solution. A solution is used to collate a bunch of things together, a bunch of different solution requirements. Not sure how it works in F&O. Complete newbie in the dark. I might have to attend one of your sessions on F&O at some point. But in terms of customizations in Dataverse, Power Automate is kind of like the backbone of it, and there's a lot of things that are embedded in Cloud Flows that are kind of working from Dataverse in terms of like flow solution history, which is a new feature we just got, and run history, which again is another new feature we got. It's all the backbone of that is all Dataverse. So we're in a solution, and I have two flows here. I might zoom in a little bit just so you can see. Now, first and foremost, I have these two flows. So we have one that says button dash greater than compose, comma, terminate. I have no idea what that flow does. I have no idea really how it's triggered, what it's triggered from. It says that it's a button. This is the automatic naming convention that Power Automate gives it. So it knows that I know that the trigger is a button, and then there's a couple of actions, but it may not be everything because I may have added things after the initial save. So if I see this, I go, well, I know what that does. No idea what that does. That's going to waste time, me going into it, figuring out what it does, creating a name and everything else. The top one is one that I think is named in a better manner. So I prefix it generally with the table name that it might be triggered from. So in this case, accounts, if I know it's triggering from the account entity inside of Dataverse. If I'm triggering this from say an alternate data source or from a Power App, for instance, I may preface it with Power App. I may preface it with the name of the application, for instance. But I'm going to use that as like, I know what that starting point is, so that I know that when I'm troubleshooting something, if something's happening and I'm doing something on an account record, for instance, it's going to do this action, and it helps me troubleshoot and helps narrow down that list. Next, I've been using the CUD actions, create, update, delete, inside of brackets to say, hey, this is only going to run on create of an account, or this is going to run on create and update an account. Again, speeds things up. You can accurately see what's going to trigger and when. And then just a brief description of potentially what the flow is a great way to handle this. If I open the flow itself, hopefully it'll go through to the flow detail screen. Yeah. A lot of people don't really use this screen very often, other than to look at flow run histories. But there is a small box which I think is about 500 characters long for description. And what I like to do is actually add in different updates into this description box, saying, hey, this is version 1. This is when I initially built it. This is version 1.1 where I added a bad path. So I can have sort of brief update notes in here to kind of say what I've done. People in the past have also used things like Azure DevOps tickets, and you can put those reference tickets in here to say this is when this was done, and you can then go back and refer to it because you're not getting that many characters. But again, really helpful if you want to get a bit more information about what the flow does, etc. So let's click on edit the flow. So This is the version 3 designer. Some people love it, some people hate it. It is the new one, so we have to kind of accept it. One of the first things that I do in any flow really is start to rename things as I go. So all of us have the best of intentions a lot of time and say, hey, we'll go back and comment that code later, or hey, we'll go back and rename those things later. 9 times out of 10, you don't do that. You have all the best intentions, but something else pulls your attention away. So it's always a best practice to start renaming things as you go. So in this instance, this is a Dataverse only flow here. So we're triggering from when an account is created. The name of that trigger is called when a row is created, updated, or deleted. What I try to do with my naming conventions is change the way that they change the majority of it, but still keep in with what that action is originally. So things like get row by ID to versus get account record is an instance of a get I know is a single record. So if I keep that get sort of acronym, not acronym, adjective in there, or verb, then I know that I know what that action actually is. So when I open it, I know it's going to give me a single row of data, which means I'm going to get an object back. Compared to list rows, like list rows 2 or list primary contact, I know that's going to be an array, and I need to handle that slightly differently. But it's important to keep those things kind of somewhat in sync so that you understand what you're doing. So I need to zoom out a little bit, I think. Yeah, I'll zoom in. Here we go. So I've got my 2 renamings of actions here. So I've got my get account record, and get row ID2 record here. Let's get rid of Copilot. I don't need that at the moment. One of the things that you can do, so again, when we've got things like these lists, for instance, a list action in Dataverse, or list action in a lot of flows like SharePoint and things like that, they don't give you an array back, so they don't give you a list of items. Now, if I know that I need to only interact with one of those items, I can use expressions. So I want to list a primary contact on an account, but there may be more than one primary contact when I'm searching for it, or the way I'm searching for it, because I don't have that GUID to just go off and get that record. So I need to do a list rows, and I need to find a contact. But by doing that, I'm going to get an array, and I don't want to add in loads of unnecessary loops. Now, Power Automate will automatically put loops in things to try and make life easier, because it thinks, hey, you're working with an array, therefore it's going to loop through like these things, and you need this. It's not all pretty much right. What you can actually do is use expressions in Power Automate to make this easier. So if I click on this one, for instance, which you can hopefully see at the top there, this is a first expression which says, hey, I know I'm going to get an array of objects. Just give me the first one. So I want just the first thing in this array, because I know that's all I'm going to need to deal with. Expressions and functions inside of Power Automate are slightly different from, say, Power Effects. If you're more used to Canvas apps, they do take a little bit getting used to, but you can still do the majority of things that you can do with Power Effects in here. One of the biggest things I always see is that people don't spend the time to look at the expressions or functions that are available. So people end up building flows badly just because they don't know any better. Now, by adding in multiple, like by not doing this and just having like various updates and loops, you're adding in loads of additional API calls. And Microsoft, from I think October, will actually start throttling people based on API call usage inside of the Power Platform. So you need to be aware of these things, especially if you're building larger and larger flows. Next tip is around comments. So you may notice here at the top, I've got this little comment block at the top of my action here. So you can add a comment into a piece of. Oh, sorry. Do you have a question, Sasha?
Yeah, sorry. I'm not sure you'll be talking about the Copilot or not in your demo, but I saw the window open and you closed it.
Yeah. I wasn't planning on talking about it, but I can answer some questions about it.
Just a relevant question while you're talking about these best practices, right? These comments and the naming of these buttons and all, right? What is the co-pilot recommendation generally? Do we get good as per your best practices and what you're recommending, or this is also kind of crappy?
It's a work in progress, is what I would say. It's a great place for people that aren't familiar with what you need to do, and it's really great. I think there's some new capabilities either just landed or just been announced that will allow you to get real-time feedback on error messages that you're seeing in your flows. So if you're hitting an error message, it'll go off and find that error message and bring that answer back to you and give you suggestions. And you can actually point to it and say, hey, change this block and do X, Y, and Z, which is great. For experience makers, Copilot's not that efficient because I know what I need to know and I need to do better than that. But say if you have someone that's new to the platform, doesn't know exactly what they need, could probably figure it out, you can use Copilot to speed up that process. It won't name things great. It will just basically use that same metadata that is available on the action itself and just name it like, get row by ID 2, get row by ID 3, get row by ID 4. Sometimes it actually just duplicates the name altogether, which I've seen a couple of times, which isn't. I think it's a bug, but need to fix that. So Copilot is there. It can help people, especially if you're running into issues. I'd say that most experience makers would probably not need it though. But there are new AI capabilities coming to Power Automate that have been announced that, like at Build last week, that will really revolutionize the way you build flows and the way you handle things. There's one where you can provide it a bunch of like documentation and say, hey, based on this documentation, make a decision about what this flow should do. And like, submitting expenses, for instance, if this person has followed all the guidance in the expenses thing, send it to an approver. If they haven't followed all the guidance, send them an email with the expenses thing, and it just automatically knows how to do it. Not played with that yet, but that seems like a really cool thing. So
yeah, exactly. So I was trying to create it like first time Power Automate using Copilot, like created Power Automate for sending my notification for something, right? In my Teams, right? So it created that, all the components, what system tools need to connect. But the conditions are missing inside. All the conditions are missing, even if maybe prompt was not that great, what I wrote, but it's also like prompt engineering, right? How good the prompt you enter. Gen A is all about prompt.
Yeah, and so it is all about prompts, but I'd also say that there needs to be some additional work. Like I use the Copilot for Copilot Studio, and I basically said I want to change this action because it's asking me for like a yes or no answer, and I actually wanted like a multiple path, and it changed it to an option set for me or a choice list. And I'm an experienced maker, but I couldn't think about what that was. I couldn't remember how to do it. Instead of me Googling something or Binging something, I could use a Copilot to do that. So it can do some good things, and there are actually tools inside of Power Automate that will write expressions for you. So there's a format by example. So if you provide it with like an example of like how you want something formatted, it'll write all the code for you, which is great. So there are some great tools in here that you can make use of.
Sure. No, thanks for that.
Cool. So comments. So this actually isn't called a comment. This is called a note. There is two things. There are notes and there are comments. There's a delete note, and there's also a comment as well that you can add in here somewhere. Maybe in here now. So comments are solution aware. Not solution aware, sorry. So they are just a row of data in a data first table, meaning that if you move your flow from, say, your dev environment to your UAT, your pre-prod and prod, those comments don't follow along with you. So use notes if you want to write something in here about what you're doing. So this is kind of just a note, a comment about what this does. I've seen people actually copy and paste the code in here before as well to try and make sure that they still have a copy of that code. Another thing that a lot of people don't use is what we call scopes. So a scope is a really cool feature. So it kind of has, in my mind, like a twofold function. One is it can kind of make your flow neater, so you can kind of collapse them, and it kind of makes it a bit smaller. So if you have like loads and loads of actions in here, you can just collapse it, and then you can navigate around your flow really easily. However, they also do have a secondary function as well, which is that they're really great when you're trying to build in error handling into your flow. So any flow that is kind of like, large enterprise, enterprise organization, you want to make sure that you are handling errors because otherwise your flows will start failing. You won't know, and then eventually a few days later you might get an email from Power Automate to say, hey, your flows are failing. Do you know about this? And you go, now I have 10,000 flows that need to all be rerun rather than like, maybe 50 if I'd caught this earlier. Excuse me. And what scopes allow you to do is configure all actions inside of Power Automate allow you to configure like the different run after states. So if I select the scope for a second and go to settings, there is a run after state here, which says, hey, run this one if the step beforehand has run successfully. So only run this if it runs successfully. So if I look at this scope down here in terms of error handling, look at this setting, this is basically saying, right, okay, only run this scope if the previous scope has timed out, skipped, or failed. So if one of the actions inside of that one has timed out, skipped, or failed, run this next one. But don't run this next one unless it hasn't failed. So you can have it where you have two scopes. One is some actions, one is your error handling, and then if the actions fail, the error handling kicks in. If the actions don't fail, the error handling skips and it goes straight onto the next action. You can carry on with your flow. So I like to group various similar things together. So if it's like a single data source, so if I'm doing like some creates and some reads and some updates and things like that to a single data source, I'll group them together. Then I'll do the error handling for that one. If it's then like a call to an API, like an additional source, I'll maybe have a scope for that one and then group everything together. What this allows you to do is do things in bulk rather than having to configure a failover for every single action in your flow. You just do it in bulk, which really saves you time, and no one has time to do it otherwise. And also because of the API calls that I mentioned earlier, you don't really want to be doing it one at a time as well. Next thing I'm going to mention is child flows. Child flows are a really great capability, again, that not a lot of people make great use of. So a child flow is a flow that can be called from another flow. So think if you have some sort of reusable component. So like one of the greatest ones I've seen done a lot is email templates. So you need to send an email out to various people in your organization based on different actions that they have. If you're building that email template every single time you're building the flow for each different scenario that you're building your flow for, you're just redoing the same thing over and over. What you actually want to do is you want to template that up inside a child flow. So you have your one child flow that has some parameters that you can pass to it. So say email address, subject, any of the data that may be going in the email body, that sort of thing, or CCs and things like that. You pass that to the child flow. The child flow generates the email, maybe sends it out, and then you go back to the parent flow and say, yep, I completed that. That task successfully. You can carry on with your flow now, and that way you kind of don't get orphan data and flows stopping halfway through. And reusable components is really great for speeding up your time. Again, time is money. Let's do things once rather than doing things all the time in different ways. Child flows, really great capability. There is also a custom connector functionality. So what a custom connector is a wrapper around an API. So I have an API call over here. So this is a HTTP action. where I have to specify all the different things. So this is the API icon has dad joke, which is a free API that you can access. And I have to put the method in. If I have any API keys, I have to put them in. If I have different bodies and things, I need to put those in. And I can run that, and it runs, it gets the data for me, and I can use it. That's all well and good. However, Icon has dad joke, and as well as many other actual professional APIs, they most often than not have multiple things that they can do. So it's not always just get a single joke back. It may be get a new record, create a record, update a record, delete a record, list records, run this job sort of thing. Now, if I had to build a HTTP action for every single time I wanted to do that in the flow, again, it's just me doing more work than I need to. Instead, what I could do is potentially create a custom connector. So this is my custom connector, and it's actually one that's available in the Power Platform under what we call the Companies House API. So Companies House is a government organisation in the UK that keeps records of all UK businesses, and they have an API, and I created a custom connector for it with all the different sort of actions that you could do. So you could search for people, you could search companies, you could search companies by a specific ID. I built all that into a single connector, and then when I actually came to publish the connector, it meant people don't have to know all those different API calls. It means people don't have to know all the different headers that they need to provide. They don't need to know all these things. They literally just get a list of actions in a custom connector. So this is just one of the actions of my custom connector. If I go to, I don't know if I can find it in here, but you can custom. There we go. If I go in here, I should hopefully, if I built, oh no, I already imported it with the one. But you essentially see a list of actions like you would in Power Automate of like list rows, get rows, search this, search that. So if I build that once and then my organization can use it, I don't need to build a HTTP action for every single API call that I want to do. I can just go back to this connect and say, okay, I want to use this action now. I want to use that action now. You build it once, then everyone can use it. So it's great. One of the things that I do like to tell people is that they should probably educate themselves. So Power Automate has a lot of different capabilities. So as Sachi said, there's Copilot capabilities, there are AI capabilities, there are these scopes and configure and afters, there's switches, there are all sorts of things. The workflow expression language as well is something that is not very well known, and people are using, and people just try and work around it. It's not really that hard to understand. It's just mainly using commas a lot of the time, and adding different parameters. And they do share a lot of similarities with other coding languages as well. But if you spend the time to actually learn it, you'll actually find your flows are a lot more proficient than they used to be. So with that, I'm just going to quickly flick back to my slides. Present. And I'm just going to summarize what we've gone through. So I'm not going to read all these in the interest of time and the fact that I just talked to you for sort of 30 minutes about this. But yeah, flow names. Names are really important. So put something in there that makes sense to you. If you have a common standard inside your organization, absolutely follow that. But do consider how other people are going to do things. I always think about the three MATs, the three MCJs. There is past MCJ, there is present MCJ, and there is future MCJ. So past MCJ builds flows for future MCJ, because future MCJ will be really annoyed at past MCJ if he didn't do it right. And then present MCJ is going, oh yeah, past MCJ did a good job. I should continue that so that future MCJ will be really happy about it. So I always think about the three MCJs. So it could be the three stashes, the 3D packs, whoever you want it to be. But it's more about if you do things in the right way now, future you will be happy. And even if it's not future you that comes to do the work, the person that takes over from you will be happy. So try and name things in a way that makes sense to everyone. Flow descriptions, really useful. I was talking to someone just yesterday about a child flow description and said that, hey, potentially what you want to do in the child flow is put in the names of the parent flows that are going to call it, because there's not an easy way to see which parent flow is called from a child flow. You can see from a parent perspective, but not from a child perspective. So if you update that child flow with a new parameter, potentially you're just thinking that there's only 1 or 2 of the flows that do it, but maybe there's 4 or 5 that you're not aware of. So they're actually a really useful tool, and not a lot of people use them. So I highly recommend taking a look at them. If you can't put everything in there, you could consider a compose step. So you could put a compose step at the top of your flow or the end of a flow after a terminate block or something like that. So it won't run, but maybe have all the notes of like what the flow does, the flows that it's called from, etc., etc. So again, just another thing to be aware of. Rename actions and triggers. So do it as you go along. I keep demoing an example of like changing a formula partway through, and it never works. It keeps working correctly when it shouldn't do. But if you do as you go along, that any of the workflow expression language that you use, if those need to be updated, then they get the right name. If you change the name later on, sometimes those workflows don't update properly. So good idea to start as you mean to go. And again, everyone has the best of intentions, but not everyone actually follows through and is able to update everything later. So it doesn't take too long. Just rename, carry on, and away you go. Use expressions. So expressions are really useful. They can do things like prevent unnecessary loops. They can do things like prevent other steps where you're maybe trying to work something out. So, if this is equal to 1, go down this path. If this is equal to 2, go down this path, and then do 2 different actions based on that. That seems pretty stupid. Why not just have a single block that's just if it's equal to 1, then this is the value. Else, if it's equal to 2, do that one. So you're minimizing the step, you're minimizing complexity by using actions. Also think about things like nested ifs. You can absolutely use a nested ifs, but it's not great. There is a switch component, like an actual component, Power Automate allows you to switch on different conditions. If you're familiar with programming languages and know about switch, it's available in Power Automate. Your mind will be blown once you find it, like mine was. So absolutely use switch when you want to. All these things do is reduce API calls and make things less complex, so people don't have to spend loads of time trying to figure it out later. Make notes. Again, the amount of times I've come to something and gone, I don't know why this is doing this. I don't know why this step is here. It seems to not be doing anything, and then you delete it and the whole flow breaks. And you're like, okay, it was doing something, it's doing something else. So add some notes in. There is that little note section that you can get at the top of each step, so someone can click into it and see it instantly. Use notes, don't use comments. They can also be a backup for code while we wait for version history. I haven't updated these slides since I wrote them. Version history is now, I think, generally I think it's in preview, but it's like generally available in all tenants. Bearing in mind your flow has to be in a Dataverse solution to actually get access to version history. But version history is a really useful thing because you can just restore a flow. So you've made a change, it's broken something, you don't remember all the code, you can now press the version history and put it back. Before that, we had to use notes or just had to use our brains to rewrite the formula again. So yeah, use notes. And it's a standard practice for any code. So there's no excuse to not really be doing it. Scopes. I said scopes are really useful. They allow you to group things together, and it makes it really easy for error handling. There is something I didn't mention, which is there is a special action called results, which is a logic apps action. So Power Automate and logic apps are based on the same technology and the same sort of engine. There is a results action that's in the logic apps documentation where you can pass it the name of an action, and it'll give you some details about it. So you can actually say, hey, give me the results of this scope that's failed. And what it'll actually do is it'll pass the error message of the scope to you. So you could log that in a table. So log it in an Azure table, log it in a database table. You could send it in an email to someone, send it in a Teams notification to someone, so they can instantly get that access to the information of what failed. So you don't have to troll back through all the flows. It's really cool. Try catch. So yeah, any good programmer, it knows about try catch. It's the same thing for Power Automate. Just because it's a low-code tool doesn't mean you shouldn't use best programming standards. So use try catch configurations to catch those errors. You can do things like sending that error message that I just spoke about. You can send the flow URL, so you can just click on a URL and instantly have that flow rather than having to look through all the flow run histories and try and find the one that failed. Really useful to use try catch, gather some information, log it somewhere, do something with it. Child flows. So again, really useful if you want to make reusable components. So something that has to run, something that has to do something. You can use it as a way to offload things, break flows up and stuff like that. And again, those reused components, it makes things a lot easier to manage as well. If you don't have a flow that has like 10,000 steps, and you have a flow that maybe has 5 steps and then 4 child flows, each with their own complexities and stuff like that, can really speed things up. Custom connectors. So HTTP actions are great to call APIs. Custom connectors allow you to wrap it all in one. So again, great for reuse. It's easier to use across the platform, especially people that don't know how APIs work. And then it can be used across the platforms. It can be used in Power Apps. It can be used in Power Automate, Power BI, for instance. Educate yourself. So yeah, just spend some time looking at it. And we were talking earlier about Copilot and how Copilot can be useful. I don't use it that much for my day-to-day because I'm an experienced builder. But those times where I haven't had that second cup of coffee yet, where I can't figure this thing out, it's really useful for people that are new to the platform, that don't know what actions are available, what connectors are available, don't know what a condition is, but they know they just want to send an email to their manager if something happens. That's where these things are really useful. So use those things and use them to educate yourself. So don't just take it at face value and just go, okay, well, it's built my flow now. Look at what it did. Figure out what it did. There are flow templates out there that you can jump into, rip apart and put back together to figure out, right, this is how someone from Microsoft or someone from the community did this and then presented it as a template for someone. How did they do it? What lessons can we learn from it? Don't just take what they give you and just say, yeah, that's fine. Educate yourself. So learn the functions, learn how each connector works, read all the blogs, watch all the YouTube, come to all the user groups, and empower yourself to be self-sufficient. There are always experts out there that can help you, but the best expert you got is yourself. So promise we're wrapping up. So this is my bonus tip. This is tip 10A because I can't control, I can't count. So there are a lot of advanced techniques in Power Automate that not a lot of people know about. So there is a guy called Peter Venstra in the UK, really lovely dude, runs sharepains.com. Big famous blogs loads of stuff about Power Automate. Excuse me. He has a method that he's dubbed Peter's method, or we've dubbed Peter's method in his honor, which is the idea that if you have a loop that is doing an action, if you're using variables, you can't run concurrency because it needs to know what's going on at any point in that flow, so you can't have concurrency turned on. If you change that variable to a compose action and you turn the maximum concurrency on, your flow will turbocharge and run really quickly. But unfortunately, your variable then is no good. If you reference that variable outside of the action in a compose step, it presents it as an array. So you can still get all those same pieces of data that you previously used in a variable to collect and just present it in an array, and it does it much quicker. He has a bunch of things like this, and a bunch of top tips. There is a former MVP and current Microsoft full-time employee called Damien Bird. He does some absolutely banana stuff with Power Automate, arrays and how to sort them and split them and all sorts of weird and wacky things. dude's a genius. Like he honestly is. Go check out his YouTube video. It's videos, they're really great. I quite like, if you come from a database world, there's a thing called fetch XML in it, where you can build fetch XML dynamically. So you can say, hey, I don't know what my query is going to be at any point in time. I can build it in the flow. That's a really cool technique that I love. And those results and other hidden gems from Logic Apps are really good. So just to close things out, coding standards. So this is a semi-shameless plug for my own coding standards, but I do include others. I don't mind what coding standards you choose. I don't mind how you choose to build your flows, as long as it will make sense to you and make sense to others inside your organization that need to support and manage and maintain those flows. So as long as everything's in a consistent way, that's great. If you don't know what consistency looks like, if you don't know what best practice looks like, I have my best practices there in GitHub. There's a fellow MVP called Matt Diavani. He recently wrote about his best practices for Power Automate last year, I think it was. And we both have similar sort of paths around it. There are some different techniques, there's some different information in each. These are just some good examples to maybe start you on your path of best practices and making sure that your flows are built in a scalable way and you don't have button dash greater than compose terminate, because that doesn't make sense to anyone. So I don't mind which you use. Semi-shameless promotion, but also Matt's a genius as well. He's got some great tips there. So with that, that is the end. And I'm happy to take any questions. If you want to connect with me, that is my link tree. So that's got all my links, my Twitter, because it's going to be Twitter forever, GitHub, LinkedIn, insert other social media here probably, my website, my YouTube, everything. So yeah, happy to answer any questions.
You can also drop your YouTube channel link here, or it might be on your profile, right, on LinkedIn.
Yeah, I can drop it anywhere.
Yeah, thank you very much. And I think we got a question from Rajit meanwhile.
Yeah, in the chat.
Rajit, you are mute if you. You can ask a question.
My experience with the new design, except for sent emails and action points, I hope we'll get better in time. Has there anything? Yeah. So the Power Automate team are working hard on the new designer. It does need a little bit of love, but I know that they are actually pumping out updates in rapid succession. We've just had the copy and paste been added, and there's a few new updates and tweaks that they're rolling out. I do hear the same feedback from the community that there are issues, and it's hard to have faith in a product like this that has issues, especially if it's one that's just in your face. So yeah, it is a work in progress. It will be the new designer going forward because it brings parity with Logic Apps, and I said earlier they're kind of on the same engine. So I think the parity issue has caused a bit of a problem because there are things that you can't do in Logic Apps that you can do in Power Automate. So bringing the two things together does hurt a little bit in the interim. But yeah, the team are working on it. The team are aware of a lot of the issues. I've seen the list of issues, and I've also seen a list of things that they've closed in a rapid succession. So I know it's not ideal, but they're working on it. So
Yeah, hi,
sorry.
Jones. Yeah, I have here one question. Actually, I'm also a FNO consultant only. How it should be like a purchase requisition workflow like that? It can be useful for the Power Automate related things or only CE related, because I have worked for one project, but at that project we have used for the Canvas apps and everything. I am unable to use this advanced feature for that project. So because UL write is also there, FNO CE data like that we can utilize. So like that, these workflows, how it will be helpful for FNO as well as CE. Can you explain us? Or and one more question, Jones. We have a issue SQL is there, right? This is low code, no code, I feel. So what should be the language we need to learn Power Automate means like C Sharp, .NET like that, or SQL Server, basic SQL Server is required, or what are the things? Or here expressions are different because strike trace, which MSBA we have to use for the flows of the data moving from one DB to another DB, one source to another source. So I have a experience about the MSBA. So based on the thing, I have talked to you. So
So I was trying to adjust my mic a little, my speaker a little bit there, just trying to hear the question. I think the first part of the question is um, should you use Power Automate if it's not just Dataverse, and can you use it on other things? Power Automate is kind of like most other parts of the Power Platform, is kind of data source agnostic. So it has there are over 1,000 connectors that can be used for Power Automate across various different data sources. And the power of the customer connectors is actually, if there isn't a data source that you want to connect to and you want to do some automation on, you can actually just build it yourself if there's an API there. So if it's a REST API, if it's an API that's compatible with the right authentication methods, you can absolutely use it. So, F&O, for instance, I'm pretty sure there's a I think they may have separated the connectors. There might be like a project operations connector and other connectors. But there are connectors out there to connect to that data, probably trigger from that data, and do something with that data. So although some of the things that I've kind of told you is kind of based in Dataverse, in which case you might want to consider spinning up a Dataverse environment as well, with somewhere to store the flows and things like that. Again, I'm not a F&O expert. You don't need it. So it's not required for Power Automate to work. But in terms of best practices that we see for a lot of all the developments, having a Dataverse environment and a solution for that, and for those flows and things like that, is always a useful thing. In terms of programming languages to learn, so Power Automate uses the workflow expression language, which is also used in logic apps. It's not the best language, and I think Microsoft appreciate this. It's one that they kind of created to do this function. They are trying to bring PowerFX, so the low-code open source language that Microsoft built, that is now open source, to all different parts of the Power Platform. So it's popping up in Dataverse and model-driven applications. It's used in Canvas apps. It's been added to Power Automate Desktop so far. I would expect to see it in Power Automate Cloud Flows eventually, so that would be a good one to learn. In terms of the other coding languages, it's never a bad thing to know something else, because it might help explain something. So I'm not a developer at heart. I call myself a low-code developer. I started learning C# recently just for fun, and I suddenly understood a lot more of the things that I was doing in Power Automate and Power Apps because of that knowledge. To things where I just did it because I thought that was how it had to be done. I actually going through some training recently and understanding like string interpolation and other things. It's actually really helped me become a better low-code developer by knowing these things. So that's kind of like a good tip. But again, if you know one programming language, like the other ones are easy to learn. And workflow expression language is not real programming language. It's just more like running a function, much like Excel. So it's not too bad. Hope
yeah,
that
thank you,
helps.
Lucas. Yeah, it's very helpful for me. Yeah, thank you.
And I think Ratchet is answering all of your questions, really.
But if we can't
Any
hear
other?
you, there's some audio issues. Rachit has replied on that. So business events, I personally have also used the business events to trigger the Power Automate. So we have built the workflow using Power Automate on purchase orders and purchase requisition both actually. It works well. Girish.
Yeah, Satya, right? Yeah, got it right.
Yep.
Yeah, got it. Satya.
Yeah, have you tried working on managerial hierarchy workflow? Something like that? Or just normal workflows?
Even the managerial hierarchy, because see, managerial hierarchy is all defined within FNO. It's
Yes.
mainly the task, right? When the task is created, that is a event. So the task being created in FNO, right? Same triggers the task in Power Automate. Basically, that's a trigger point. All the logic which is in FNO, that is still there. You still need to use that. Like, why will you create everything into Power Automate again? That's a really complex structure in FNO.
Yeah.
You should not be replicating that.
Am I audible now?
Yep, Rajit.
Yeah, cool. Thanks. Yeah, so just to answer this workflow hierarchy question, yes, as Satya mentioned, workflow hierarchy is evaluated every time within X++ inside FNO. But what you can do is there are workflow work items and different type of workflow business events. So if you will go to business event catalog, and if you filter all the business events of type workflow, then there you'll find heaps and heaps of workflow events. So if you are trying to capture a particular event in workflow, you activate it, it can trigger a Power Automate. So it will be a hybrid solution where your hierarchy evaluation happens in FNO, but the approval part can happen via Power Automate.
Okay.
Okay, thank
Thanks,
you, Rajit.
Rajit.
Yeah, cool.
Rajit, one more question I have, not to related to Power Automate. And when should be the this AX 2012 R3 version topped by the Microsoft support related things? Do you have any idea?
Sorry, you're breaking up, Girish. Say that again.
Support of
Yeah,
AX20 R3
yes.
when is being it's going out of support from Microsoft. That's the question, Vish.
Yes, Satya.
I
Maybe
think
I
it is
think I'm
already
having, yeah.
it's already out of support.
But few companies are again using the same X 2012 R3 because
I have seen companies using 3.0. You cannot tell them not to use because they have already paid licenses. Okay, so definitely Microsoft will not support, but partners can support them definitely.
okay,
Out of
partners
support
will
means
support.
that
Okay,
Microsoft will not provide you any resolution in case of any issues, but you
Correct.
can still use it. Yeah.
yeah, that is my question actually because Microsoft product team needs to be not involved in this such kind of activities, right?
Yeah.
That we cannot comment right now, but yeah, definitely they are not supporting because of the product team is actually moving towards the cloud versions of the finance and operation, and that's their goal. So they will not focus on the lower version of the application, as for my understanding from Microsoft.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, thank you.
Sorry, Matt, I had one question on connectors. So basically,
Yeah.
as you said, connectors are like a proxy to an application. We can also model those calls using HTTP direct calls, but that will be more complex, whereas connectors simplify the way how we interact with an application. So
Yeah.
does it impact performance? Like, is it going some sort of transformation at the connector level before hitting the actual application, or is it very minimal? Like, is it not to be something to be worried about?
No, it's nothing to be worried about. Essentially, what you're doing is like compiling a connector in platform, just like the HTTP action is a connector in platform. So all you're doing is just alleviating some of the manual configuration stresses. But no, there's no impact from doing one to the other really. The only caveat to it really is that connectors are solution aware, and they're not something that you can push out at a tenant level easily. So, say you're working with an organization that may have like 300 different environments or 200 different environments. If you create that connector to do an action, you have to then go and deploy it 200 times. And if you make an update to it, you need to deploy it 200 times. I think I saw your question about, does this do a similar role to API Manager in Azure integration layer? Yes. It's been around for several years, so it was around before API Manager was really around. if you're looking for those more enterprise level scale things where you want like loads of people to be hitting that API and you don't have to do that deployment manually, you can configure API Manager to do basically the same thing. So yeah. I think you're on mute if you.
Yeah, I think yeah. Thanks for the responses, Matt. Yeah, great tips. I think we are.
And one more
from Satish.
last question.
Yeah.
Yeah, Jones, last question I have. And like FNO like that, there should be any versions is also there for Power Automate.
So what was the question? Is it dependencies or
Versioning? How many versions? Like what
oh,
is any
versions?
versionings, right?
Oh, it's a cloud service. So there is just one-ish version, which is the cloud version. There is two different designers currently, version 3 and version 1. I think it's version 3 and version 1. But essentially it's just one version, one platform, one service.
So to add on, Power Automate works on desktop installation also. That's in different, again, a different version of Power Automate. This is called Power Automate desktop version. Again, the cloud flows are different, which is purely on cloud. Versions will increase based on their more productivity, more features to be added, then the versions will keep on increasing. Okay, so but the lower versions, it's your wish to keep it, but most of the time when it is cloud will be always focused on the higher version because it will have more features, more efficiencies. The errors which has been experienced by a lot of customers will be downgraded. Obviously, that's the reason the higher versions will be released for most of the efficient work which has been going on with the different customers and partners. Hope
Can
that
we just
answers your
edit out
question.
the
Thank
part?
you, Umesh and Jones. Yeah,
Can we
thank
edit out
you,
the part where I
Umesh.
forget that Power Automate Desktop exists? Because I think they might revoke my FTRSA if I forget that it exists.
That could be the case, but yeah, Power Automate Desktop is there.
Yeah. There's also Process Advisor as well, which Microsoft claim is part of Power Automate, which analyzes processes using the desktop recorder essentially, and then suggests automations based on that.
That has been again, I think that has been again clubbed with Copilot now. That's what I've been seeing.
Yeah, so it's all fun and games.
Yep.
Okay, thank you very much for everyone for all the questions. And Matt, if do we have last question, last one or two? We're running out of time, just realizing that.
So, hi all. I have one question. So, like, suppose when we are using this Power Automate, we are calling some child flows also. So, and we are using some third-party connectors like Adobe and other connectors. But sometime, like after run, it is like intermittently failing with timeout error or some error. So, is there any mechanism Power Automate flow providing, like it will retry these failures from platform side, or like for this kind of intermittent issue, is there anything we can do?
Yeah, so Power Automate does actually provide out of the box a retry mechanism. So you can tell it how many times to retry. Let me reshare my screen for a second. So in the HTTP action, for instance, there's an action timeout. So you can actually configure this with like how many times to run this before timing out, and there's a retry policy as well. So you can say, hey, I want to retry this X number of times before before it fails. There's a few other settings in here which I might need to read up on. Retry request operations and retry policy. Oh yes, the specify the duration. Yeah. So yeah, you can set the retry policy in here. I would say though that if you're experiencing those timeouts, couple of things to do. One is to check this and try tweaking the timeouts. Two, work out where the timeouts are happening. So if it is those third-party connectors, maybe talk to those providers and say, hey, I'm getting these timeout errors. Is this something that you're doing? Are you seeing this traffic? Are you actively blocking it? Or is it just that your servers can't reply fast enough and we just need to increase the headers? And also put some try-catch errors there to catch these things. And then you could always have a child flow that if you are hitting that timeout, you could essentially call that child flow to redo that same action. So if you know there's one action that constantly fails, you could always, after the timeout, if it's an important thing, you could potentially go try just running that again. So maybe sometimes a new call after say 5 minutes will sometimes alleviate that sort of issue if they're having like throttling issues and stuff like that. But yeah, timeout, like try the retry policies and the timeout policies in the connector, as well as having a look at the try fails, try catches, try error handling, see where it's happening. Does that help?
Thank you. Yeah.
Okay. Matt, any last advice, 11th or 12th tip? We got the one bonus tip from you.
What the one bonus tip? So I would keep an eye on the generative AI stuff. No shocker, but like how a flow can determine what to do, and then do actions based on that is going to be like next level for your automation, especially when you're in large organizations where potentially data changes over time and decisions change over time. If you have a documentation that's updated and things like that, and you can tell the flow, hey, do these actions based on this, that's gonna alleviate you having to refactor flows every 6 months, every 12 months, every 18 months. So yeah, get ahead on that one, and just go ahead and learn the workflow expression language. Even if you don't use it in Power Automate, if you ever come to do Power Apps, it's the same language, so it's really gonna help you. So sorry, I'm just banging on about the same things that I already said, but yeah, just education. So told you as a teacher, really, in a past life.
Absolutely. See, this is I think today you are stuck in all FNO people, right? Most of us are FNO, and everyone in our world as well talking about Power Platform in general, right? Which is really highlight the importance of this new technology. But Microsoft is kind of investing so much now, right?
Yeah.
So it's fine, right? We need to invite you again in this, I know, and we need to learn more about Power Platform.
I'll go learn some X++ for next time. See if I know what I'm talking about then.
No, absolutely.
I think one good tip will be to deploy a trial environment, and that gives you access to Power Automate, and you can test it out. So even if you don't have access from your organization or from your client, you can create your own trial and learn it. Yeah.
Yeah, there are trials, there are developer accounts that are free from Microsoft. They provide you a whole host of tools to go play with. I learned by doing. I had no formal education in this. I just started playing around and working out how it worked, and then I started documenting it all. So if you go to my YouTube channel, there are over 400 videos on that channel
I just noticed that.
Yeah, the majority of it, or like a lot of it, is on like the workflow expression language, because people don't know how it works. And then I just started going to all the connectors and said, hey, how does this work? Because the documentation, not great. So what does this one do? What does this one do? What does this one do? And then just document it all. And it's partly for teaching others, and partly because I have a terrible memory and I can't remember how I did things. So I just have to write it down or make a video about it so I can refer to it later.
Exactly. Yeah, it's good, right? You do documentation for your own, and other people can also see that, right? That's a best motivation for yourself.
Absolutely.
Okay. Realizing it's a working day for you, Matt. If there is no more question, I would like to let you go and focus on your work today.
Cool. Well, thank you very much for the invite today. I really appreciate it.
Sorry, we have last minute question.
Thank you, Matt.
If you wanna ask a question?
Yeah. Sorry. Actually, we are using for one of our clients these flows and Power Automate actually. for the customized process as well as some default process like purchase order, purchase requisitions. I like to know whether this is feasible or not. For example, if a approver not taken any action against that work item, is it possible to send a reminder to them? For example, every 2 days till the action is taken.
Is that inside of Power Automate?
Yes.
You're doing the approvals, yeah.
Yeah, currently we are sending this notification in Teams as well as a mail reminder, mail actually. We like to send a notification if that user is not taken any action against that work item.
I haven't looked at the approvals connector recently, but I think that there is there is a way to you could potentially put it inside a do until loop. So keep doing this approval action until something happens, and you can potentially add a delay in there to say, hey, if they haven't done this, delay to X amount. I've not looked at it in a while. I don't know if there's any native capabilities to send reminders. But yeah, there's potential ways to do that. It's a good question. It's trying to bug me now. I'm gonna have to go look at it and go and try and figure it out. Because it seems like a very common request, like, hey, you've not approved this in 2 days. Can I go bug you about it somewhat? So but sorry,
Okay.
I don't know the answer, but I'm sure there is a way to do it, either with a do until loop or a potentially even a child flow that goes and bugs them about it. But yeah. Don't know the answer off the top of my head, I'm afraid.
Okay.
Yep, Rachit, maybe you have worked on this. This is a normal workflow question, right? Any workflow item which remains unattended.
I think in FNO it is available as a part of the workflow framework, but if it is through Power Automate approvals, then I'm not sure if Power Automate approvals, probably the data is stored somewhere in Dataverse, and you can have another Power Automate which queries it and sees, okay, if the workflow is in pending from last 2 days, send another reminder. But yeah, from FNO perspective, yes, definitely it's possible, but I can't comment on the Power Automate side at the moment.
Yep, seems logical. Looks like a common requirement as well. There should be a way. Wait, subscribe to Matt's channel, right? You must be posting very soon about this.
Sure.
And Matt,
But really great insights, Matt. Really appreciate the tips which you have shared, because sometimes we just go with the happy flow connections and actions, but these things really improve the overall performance and the beauty of the solution.
Yeah, that's why I do it. So yeah. Well, thank you for the invite, and thank you everyone for attending.
Thank you, Matt, as well. Yep.
All right.
Thank you.
thank you guys.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks for attending.
Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.
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 Bye.